Do you know how betrayal feels? Want to find out?
They say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the worst person you'll ever meet is sleeping right next to you every night. My name is Jake Morrison, and I run Morrison's Body Shop on the wrong side of Millbrook, Massachusetts. It's not much to look at, peeling paint, cracked concrete, and a sign that's been crooked since Hurricane Sandy. But it's mine. And in a town where the factory closed 10 years ago and half the storefronts are boarded up, that counts for something. I should have known something was wrong when Linda started caring about her appearance again. My wife of 12 years suddenly discovered yoga pants that cost more than my monthly coffee budget and began scheduling girls' nights with a frequency that would make a teenager jealous. The rain was coming down like bullets that Tuesday evening when I decided to head home early. My ancient Ford pickup had been making sounds like a dying walrus all week, and I figured I'd grab some tools and fix the leaky gasket before it left me stranded. The irony wasn't lost on me later. I was better at fixing machines than relationships. I pulled into our driveway, noting Linda's BMW wasn't there. Probably another late night at the law firm, I thought. She'd made partner 6 months ago and had been working longer hours ever since, or so she claimed. The house felt different when I walked in. Not just empty, violated somehow, like someone had been rearranging the furniture of my life while I wasn't looking. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and was heading upstairs when I heard it. Giggling, high-pitched, breathy giggling coming from our bedroom. I froze on the stairs, my mechanic's instincts kicking in. When something sounds wrong, you investigate. When something sounds really wrong, you investigate carefully. The giggling stopped, replaced by Linda's voice, low and sultry in a way I hadn't heard in years. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place, same time. My blood turned to ice water. I crept up the remaining stairs, each creak of the old wood sounding like cracks of thunder in my ears. No, he's still at the shop. He never comes home early. A pause, then that giggle again. God, you're so bad. Yes, I'm wearing it. The red one you like. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it downstairs. Through the crack in the bedroom door, I could see Linda on our bed, phone pressed to her ear, wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. I love you too, Tommy. See you tomorrow night. Tommy. The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. There was only one Tommy in Linda's orbit. Tommy Brennan, the golden boy PE teacher at Millbrook High, 6'2", muscles like a bodybuilder, and the kind of square jaw that made middle-aged women forget they had husbands. I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. 12 years of marriage, and she was throwing it away for some muscle-bound high school hero who probably peaked at 17. But I'm not the type to make scenes. I'm the type to gather evidence. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life. I installed a tracking app on Linda's phone while she showered. Amazing what you can learn from YouTube when you're motivated. I followed her after work, watching from parking lots and side streets as she met Tommy at various motels around town. The real breakthrough came when I decided to search our bedroom more thoroughly. Linda had always been careless with details. It's what made her a decent lawyer, but a terrible conspirator. Under our bed, shoved behind a box of winter clothes, I found a gym bag I'd never seen before. Inside, a bottle of cheap cologne that made me gag, 2 hotel keycards from different motels, and a Polaroid photo that made my stomach turn. Linda, wearing the red lingerie from that phone call, posed like a centerfold. But it was the reflection in the mirror behind her that sealed the deal. Tommy's unmistakable gorilla arms holding the camera. Should have gotten that gasket fixed, I muttered, staring at the photo. Like my marriage. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something cold and calculating settle into my chest. Linda thought she was so smart, so careful. She had no idea she was married to a man who'd spent 20 years figuring out how things worked, and more importantly, how to take them apart. That night, I followed Linda to the high school. She parked behind the gym and slipped inside through a side door that Tommy had obviously left unlocked for her. Through the windows, I could see them together in the weight room, and I snapped photos with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. As I crouched in the shadows, watching my wife betray everything we'd built together, I realized something that should have scared me, but instead filled me with a strange sense of purpose. I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I was about to become the author of their destruction. The next morning, Linda hummed while making coffee. Actually hummed, like she was starring in her own romantic comedy. I sat at our kitchen table, watching this woman I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, and marveled at how easily she compartmentalized her life. "You seem happy," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She flashed me a smile that probably cost Tommy a lot of effort to earn. "Just feeling good about work lately. The Peterson case is going really well." The Peterson case had wrapped up 3 weeks ago, I knew, because I'd actually been listening back then, back when I thought my wife's lies were just about billable hours and client meetings. "That's great, honey. You've been working so many late nights lately. I barely see you anymore." Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at having to maintain the charade. "Well, partnership comes with responsibilities. You wouldn't understand." There it was. The casual dismissal, the subtle reminder that she was the one with the law degree, the one who'd elevated herself above her blue-collar husband. I'd been hearing variations of it for months, but now I understood what it really meant. I wasn't worth the truth anymore. "You're right," I said, standing up. "I probably wouldn't understand a lot of things, like who's been training you after hours at the gym." The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor. Linda stared at me, her face cycling through surprise, fear, and finally settling on indignation. What the heck is that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos from the night before. Linda and Tommy, locked in an embrace that left no room for interpretation. Her face went white, then red, and then white again. "You followed me? You sick, paranoid—" "Save it." I pocketed the phone. "I found your little love nest supplies under our bed. The photos, the hotel cards, the whole pathetic collection." For a moment, I thought she might confess, might show some remorse, or at least acknowledge what she'd done. Instead, Linda straightened her shoulders and looked at me with the same cold expression she probably used on opposing counsel. "You're crazy, Jake. You need help. Professional help." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired it. Almost. Am I crazy? Or are you just that bad at covering your tracks? I don't know what sick fantasy you've cooked up in your head, but I'm not discussing this anymore. I'm late for work. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, stepping carefully around the broken coffee mug. At the threshold, she turned back. "Clean up that mess." "And Jake? Get some help. This paranoid behavior is embarrassing." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the shattered ceramic and the crystalline clarity of my situation. Linda wasn't just cheating, she was rewriting history, making me the villain in her story of liberation. That's when I decided to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I spent the day planning. Not some half-baked confrontation or dramatic scene, but a systematic dismantling of the fantasy world Linda and Tommy had built together. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that the quiet guy who fixed cars for a living had picked up a few other skills over the years. That evening, I drove to the high school and parked across the street. Linda's BMW was already there, tucked behind the building like a guilty secret. Tommy's red Camaro was parked next to it, because, of course, a guy like Tommy drove a red Camaro. I popped my truck's hood and walked over to Tommy's car with a small device I'd picked up from my shop. A remote-controlled engine end switch, the kind repo men use to disable cars without damaging them. It took me about 3 minutes to install it under Tommy's hood. Then I settled in to wait. An hour later, they emerged from the gym, Tommy's arm around Linda's waist like he owned her. They kissed goodbye next to their cars, a long, passionate embrace that made my stomach churn. Tommy got into his Camaro and turned the key. The engine roared to life, then immediately died. He tried again with the same result. "What the heck?" I heard him mutter as he popped the hood. While Tommy played mechanic, I activated the device in my pocket and stepped out of the shadows. "Having car trouble?" I called out, walking toward them with my hands visible and empty. Linda spun around, her face a mask of horror. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "Just thought I'd see how my wife's personal training sessions were going." I looked at Tommy, who was still bent over his engine. "You must be the trainer. Tommy Brennan, right?" Tommy straightened up, and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He was everything I'd expected. Tall, muscular, with the kind of confident swagger that came from being the star athlete in a small town where that still mattered. "Who the heck are you?" he demanded. "I'm the husband." I smiled, pulling the taser from my jacket pocket. "And you're the a-hole who's been screwing my wife." Tommy's eyes widened, but his jock instincts kicked in and he started toward me. "Listen, buddy, I don't know what you think." I didn't let him finish. The taser caught him right in the groin, 50,000 volts of instant justice. Tommy dropped like a sack of potatoes, convulsing on the asphalt while making sounds I'd never heard a human make before. Jesus Christ, Jake! Linda screamed, rushing to Tommy's side. I stood over them both, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. You know, I always wondered if these things really worked as advertised. Thanks for helping me find out. Linda looked up at me with pure hatred. You're insane. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Tell them how you found me here. Explain what you were doing at the high school at 9 o'clock at night with Mr. All-American over there. She fumbled for her phone, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Calling the police meant questions, and questions meant explanations she wasn't ready to give. Tommy groaned and tried to sit up. I helped him by grabbing his shirt and pulling him to his feet. Here's how this is going to work, I said, my voice conversational. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to find a new job in a new town. And if I ever see you within 50 miles of Linda again, I'll introduce you to some of my other shop tools. Tommy nodded frantically, still unable to speak properly. I turned to Linda, who was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. As for you, we'll talk when you get home. If you get home. I walked back to my truck, leaving them in the parking lot. As I drove away, I could see Linda in my rearview mirror, kneeling next to Tommy, probably calling emergency. By morning, the whole town would know that someone had given the golden boy a shock treatment behind the high school. They just wouldn't know who, but they were about to find out. The next morning, Millbrook was buzzing with gossip like a kicked hornet's nest. Tommy Brennan, the town's golden boy, had been found behind the high school with what the police were calling mysterious injuries to his groin area. The official story was that he'd suffered some kind of electrical accident while working late. I learned all this from my friend, Mike Costello, who owned Costello's bar on Main Street and had his finger on the pulse of every rumor in town. You hear about Tommy Brennan? Mike asked when I stopped by for lunch. The PE teacher? What about him? Mike leaned across the bar, lowering his voice. Someone tased the poor bastard right in the balls. Found him behind the high school last night, twitching like a fish. I nearly choked on my beer. No kidding? Any idea who did it? Police are being tight-lipped, but word is there was a woman with him. Married woman, if you catch my drift. I caught his drift perfectly. Sounds like someone's husband got tired of sharing. That's what I'm thinking. Good for him, whoever he is. About time someone taught that muscle-bound pretty boy a lesson. Mike had never liked Tommy, mainly because Tommy had stolen Mike's girlfriend back in high school. In a town like Millbrook, grudges had a long shelf life. I finished my beer and headed back to the shop, where my employee Danny was working on a transmission rebuild. Boss, you hear about Coach Brennan? Danny asked without looking up from his work. Yeah, Mike filled me in. Sounds like he stuck his Johnson where it didn't belong. Danny laughed. My cousin goes to the high school. Says half the soccer moms have been throwing themselves at Brennan since he started there. Guess one of their husbands finally had enough. The irony was delicious. The whole town was cheering for the unknown husband who defended his marriage, and they had no idea he was standing right there in coveralls rebuilding a carburetor. But my satisfaction was short-lived. Around 3 o'clock, Linda's BMW pulled up outside the shop. She got out wearing her most expensive suit and the expression she reserved for hostile witnesses. We need to talk, she said, walking into the bay like she owned the place. Danny took one look at her face and found urgent business in the back office. Sure thing, honey. What's on your mind? Linda's eyes were cold as winter. You know exactly what's on my mind. What you did last night was assault. I could have you arrested. For what? I wasn't anywhere near the high school last night. I was home working on paperwork. Danny can vouch for me. I called him around 9 to ask about parts for the Henderson job. It was true, technically. I had called Danny right after I'd left the parking lot. You're lying. Prove it. Show me one piece of evidence that puts me at that school. Linda's jaw tightened. She was used to having all the answers, used to being the smartest person in the room. But she was playing in my world now, and I knew the rules better than she did. This isn't over, Jake. I won't let you destroy my life because of your sick jealousy. Destroy your life? I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Sweetheart, you did that all by yourself. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the wreckage. She turned to leave, then spun back around. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was an email draft addressed to the senior partners at her law firm, with the photos from the gym attached. I haven't sent this yet, I said conversationally. But I'm thinking the Peterson case isn't the only thing you've been working hard on lately. The color drained from Linda's face. You wouldn't dare. Try me. We stared at each other across the garage, 12 years of marriage reduced to a standoff between enemies. You bastard, she whispered. Yeah, probably. But I'm a bastard who's tired of being played for a fool. Linda left without another word, her heels clicking angrily against the concrete floor. I watched her drive away and realized that I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even noticed until it was gone. But the feeling didn't last long. An hour later, Tommy Brennan walked into my shop. He moved carefully, like a man with tender areas, but he was upright and clearly functional. More importantly, he was angry. You son of a witch, he said, his voice tight with pain and rage. Danny started to get up from his workbench, but I waved him off. It's okay, Danny. Mr. Brennan and I are just going to have a friendly chat. Tommy stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. You think you're real smart, don't you? Hiding behind your little gadgets like a coward? I think you've got me confused with someone else. I'm just a mechanic. Cut the crap. I know it was you last night. Prove it. I set down my wrench and faced him fully. Show me one witness, one piece of evidence, one shred of proof that I was anywhere near you and my cheating wife last night. The word cheating hit him like a physical blow. Whatever fantasy he'd been living, whatever story Linda had been telling him about their relationship, it didn't include acknowledging the reality of what they were doing. Linda's not happy, Tommy said, changing tactics. She deserves better than some grease monkey who can't satisfy her. That's when I smiled, and it must have been a scary smile, because Tommy actually took a step back. You're absolutely right, I said. Linda deserves exactly what she's going to get. I reached for a heavy toolbox on the shelf above my workbench, pretending to grab something from inside. Tommy, still jumpy from the night before, flinched and stepped backward, right into the path of the falling toolbox. The box caught him on the foot, and from the sound he made, I was pretty sure something important had just gotten broken. Oh, heck, I said loudly enough for Danny to hear. Sorry about that, Tommy. These old shelves are getting unreliable. You okay? Tommy was hopping on one foot, his face twisted with pain. You freaking... Careful with the language, I interrupted. There might be kids around. Danny had come running at the sound of the crash. Jesus, Coach Brennan, you need me to call an ambulance? Tommy looked around the shop, taking in Danny's concerned expression and the perfectly innocent way I was examining the supposedly faulty shelf bracket. He was smart enough to realize that this was going to look like another accident, just like the night before. No, he said through gritted teeth. No ambulance, I'm fine. He limped toward the door, pausing to look back at me. This isn't over. I sure hope not, I replied. I'm just getting started. After Tommy left, Danny shook his head. Bad luck follows that guy around, doesn't it? Some people make their own luck, I said, getting back to work. But I wasn't really thinking about Tommy anymore. I was thinking about Linda and about the email that was still sitting in my drafts folder. It was time to let her colleagues know exactly what kind of partner they just promoted. That evening, I sat in my living room with a beer and my laptop, crafting what might have been the most important email of my life. The photos from the gym were crystal clear, and I'd managed to get shots that showed both Linda's face and enough of Tommy to make identification easy. But I wasn't going to send them to her law firm. Not yet. Instead, I was going to send them to someone who would appreciate them much more, Sarah Mitchell, Linda's best friend and fellow associate at the firm. Sarah and Linda had been inseparable since law school, but I'd always sensed something off about their friendship. The way Sarah looked at Linda, the way she hung on every word, the slight edge in her voice whenever Linda mentioned our marriage. It had taken me years to figure out what I was seeing. Sarah was in love with Linda, had been for years, probably since law school. And if I was right about that, then she was going to be very interested in seeing proof of Linda's affair with Tommy. I attached the photos to an email and typed a simple message. Thought you should know what Linda's been up to, a concerned friend. I sent it from an anonymous email account I'd created, then settled back to wait. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Jake? Sarah's voice was tight, controlled. Can we talk? Sure, Sarah. What's on your mind? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Costello's in an hour? And an hour later, I was sitting across from Sarah Mitchell in a back booth at Mike's bar. She looked like she'd been crying, but she was holding herself together with the kind of professional composure that made her a good lawyer. You sent me those photos, she said without preamble. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap, Jake. We both know why we're here. I took a sip of my beer and studied her face. Sarah was attractive in a sharp, angular way, all business suits and severe haircuts. She was also smart, ambitious, and completely devoted to Linda. Okay, I said. Let's say hypothetically that I did send you some photos. What would you want to talk about? Sarah's composure cracked slightly. How long has this been going on? A few months, as far as I can tell, maybe longer. And you're sure it's serious? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo I'd found under our bed. Linda in the red lingerie. This was taken in my house, in my bedroom. You tell me how serious that is. Sarah stared at the photo for a long moment, her hands clenched into fists on the table. That witch, she whispered. Excuse me? Nothing. Sarah looked up at me and I could see calculation in her eyes. What do you want, Jake? I want my wife to face consequences for what she's done. I want her to understand that actions have repercussions. And you think destroying her career is the way to do that? I think Linda believes she's untouchable. I think she's gotten so comfortable with lying and manipulating that she's forgotten other people have feelings. Maybe a little professional embarrassment will remind her. Sarah nodded slowly. The senior partners are very conservative, very concerned about the firm's reputation. If they saw these photos, Linda would be looking for a new job. Probably. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us thinking about what Linda's professional destruction would look like. There's something else, Sarah said finally. Something you should know about Linda and me. I waited. We had a relationship in law school before she met you. It was intense. I wasn't surprised, but I let Sarah think she was shocking me. I see. She broke it off when she decided she wanted a normal life, a husband, kids, the whole suburban dream. Sarah's voice was bitter. She used me, Jake, just like she's using you now. And you've been carrying a torch for her ever since. Sarah's laugh was harsh. Pathetic, isn't it? 12 years of watching her play house with you, hoping she'd realize what she really wanted. What she really wanted was Tommy Brennan, apparently. No, Sarah shook her head. Tommy's just a midlife crisis with muscles. Linda doesn't love him any more than she loves you. She loves the idea of him, the excitement, the danger, the feeling of being desired. I was starting to understand why Sarah had wanted to meet. You have an idea. I have a proposition. You want to hurt Linda, really hurt her? Then we work together. What did you have in mind? Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with malice. Linda's up for a promotion to senior partner. The decision gets made next month, and it's between her and 2 other candidates. If the right information reached the right people at the right time, she'd be finished. Completely. And Jake, I know things about Linda that would make these photos look like a church newsletter. I studied Sarah's face, seeing years of suppressed resentment and unrequited love twisted into something ugly and vengeful. She was offering to help me destroy Linda, but she had her own reasons that had nothing to do with justice or betrayal. What's in it for you? I asked. Satisfaction, and maybe the chance to pick up the pieces afterward. It was a devil's bargain, but I was rapidly running out of angels to make deals with. Tell me more, I said. Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Linda's been skimming money from client accounts to pay for her little love nest with Tommy. Nothing huge, just a few thousand here and there, but enough to fund hotel rooms and expensive lingerie. My blood went cold. She's stealing? Borrowing, she calls it. Always pays it back before anyone notices. But if someone were to audit the accounts at just the right moment, she'd be disbarred, probably prosecuted. At the very least. And Jake? I have copies of all the financial records. I stared at Sarah, realizing that Linda had been playing with fire in ways I'd never imagined. Bad enough that she was cheating, but stealing from clients to finance her affair was beyond stupid. It was criminal. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of watching Linda get everything she wants while treating the people who love her like garbage. It's time she learned that actions have consequences. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. Bank records, hotel receipts, credit card statements. Enough to bury her professionally and personally. I took the drive, feeling its weight in my palm. What do you want me to do with this? That's up to you. But Jake, whatever you decide, decide fast. Linda's getting suspicious about the photos. She's been asking questions, making accusations. It won't be long before she figures out we're working together. Sarah stood up, leaving money on the table for her drink. I'll be in touch. After she left, I sat alone in the booth, turning the flash drive over in my hands. I'd wanted to hurt Linda, to make her pay for what she'd done to our marriage. But this was bigger than adultery. This was her entire life. I thought about 12 years of marriage, about the woman I'd fallen in love with and the stranger she'd become. I thought about Tommy Brennan and his smug assumption that he could take whatever he wanted. I thought about Sarah Mitchell and her twisted love that had curdled into hate. Then I thought about Linda's face when she'd called me paranoid, when she tried to gaslight me into believing my own eyes were lying. I pocketed the flash drive and headed home. It was time to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day going through Sarah's files. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Linda hadn't just been skimming money. She'd been running a systematic scheme for months, moving funds between accounts to cover her tracks while financing her affair with Tommy. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, even the red lingerie from the photos. All of it paid for with money stolen from clients who trusted her with their legal problems. I was still processing the magnitude of Linda's betrayal when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Linda's office number. "Jake, we need to talk." Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "About what?" "Don't play dumb. Someone sent photos to people at my firm, photos of me at the gym." "That's terrible. Any idea who would do such a thing?" "Cut the crap, Jake. I know it was you." "Actually, it wasn't, but I'm not surprised someone did it. Small town, lots of gossip. You and Tommy weren't exactly subtle." There was a long pause. "What do you want?" "I want you to come home tonight. I want us to have an honest conversation about our marriage." "And if I don't?" I looked at the flash drive sitting on my desk. "Then tomorrow morning, the State Bar Association gets a very interesting package about your creative accounting practices." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "You bastard." "I'll see you at home, Linda. We have a lot to discuss." That evening, Linda came home looking like she'd aged 5 years in one day. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her hands were shaking slightly. "Pour yourself a drink," I said from my chair in the living room. "You're going to need it." She went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of wine that was more like a glass of wine with a splash of wine. She sat on the couch across from me, as far away as she could get while still being in the same room. "What do you want, Jake?" I held up the flash drive. "I want to know how long you've been stealing from your clients to pay for your affair." The wine glass slipped from her fingers, but this time she caught it before it hit the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Riverside Motel, room 237, every Tuesday for 3 months. The Marriott downtown, presidential suite, for your 6-month anniversary with Tommy. The Victoria's Secret charges, the jewelry, the dinners at restaurants we could never afford." I set the drive on the coffee table between us. "All of it paid for with money you stole from people who trusted you." Linda's face went through the same color changes I'd seen in the kitchen, but this time she didn't try to deny it. "It's not stealing," she said quietly. "I always pay it back. Before anyone notices, except someone did notice, didn't they? Someone's been keeping track." "Sarah." The name came out like a curse. "That jealous witch has been watching me for months." "Sarah's in love with you, has been since law school. Did you know that?" Linda laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course I knew. I used it to get through law school. Let her help me with everything while I focused on finding a husband who could give me the life I wanted." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "And now you're throwing that life away for what? A muscle-bound PE teacher? You don't understand. You never understood. I was suffocating, Jake. Trapped in this dead-end town with a man who smells like motor oil and thinks dinner at Applebee's is fine dining. So you decided to spice things up with some embezzlement and adultery? I decided to take what I deserved. Do you know how hard I've worked to get where I am? How many sacrifices I've made?" "Sacrifices?" I stood up, feeling 12 years of resentment finally boiling over. "You mean like marrying the guy who put you through law school? Like living in the house he bought for you? Like pretending to love the man who's been supporting your dreams while you've been pissing all over his—" Linda stood up too, her face flushed with wine and anger. "I never asked you to do any of that. I never asked you to be my hero. No, you just asked me to be your fool. And I was for 12 years, but I'm done now." "What's that supposed to mean?" I picked up my phone and showed her the screen. It was an email addressed to the senior partners at her firm, the State Bar Association, and the District Attorney's Office. The flash drive's contents were attached, along with the photos from the gym and a detailed timeline of Linda's activities. "This goes out in 12 hours," I said, "unless you do exactly what I tell you to do." Linda stared at the phone like it was a loaded tool. "You're bluffing. Try me." She sat down heavily, the fight going out of her all at once. "What do you want?" "First, you're going to call Tommy and end it, tonight. I want to hear every word." "Jake, please." "Second, you're going to write out a confession detailing exactly how much money you've stolen and from which accounts. You're going to return every penny with interest." "That's impossible. I don't have that kind of cash." "Then you'll figure it out. Sell your car, liquidate your retirement account. I don't care, but you're going to make those people whole." Linda was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "You're destroying my life." "No, Linda, you destroyed your life. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the wreckage." She made the call to Tommy on speakerphone. It was brutal. She told him it was over, that she'd made a mistake, that she never wanted to see him again. Tommy's confusion and hurt were painful to listen to, but I felt no sympathy for him. He'd known she was married when he started sleeping with her. The confession took longer. Linda tried to minimize the amounts, to make excuses, but I had the bank records right there. Every lie was immediately exposed, every attempt at justification shot down. By midnight, it was done. Linda sat on our couch, surrounded by tissues and empty wine glasses, looking like the ruins of the woman I'd married. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you pray that returning the money and resigning from the firm is enough to keep you out of prison." "And us? Our marriage?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. "There is no us, Linda. There hasn't been for months, maybe years." "Jake, please, I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, start over. Some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals are too deep, too complete. You didn't just cheat on me, Linda. You stole from innocent people to finance your affair. You lied to my face every day for months. You tried to make me think I was crazy for believing my own eyes." I stood up and headed for the stairs. "I'll be staying at Mike's place for a while. You can have the house until the divorce is final." "Divorce? Did you think we were going to renew our vows? You destroyed our marriage, Linda. Now you get to live with the consequences." I packed a bag while Linda sat downstairs crying. As I was leaving, she called out to me one last time. "I loved you, Jake." I really did. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. "No, you didn't. You loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." The next morning, Linda's resignation letter was on the senior partner's desk, along with a full confession and a cashier's check covering the money she'd stolen. The photos never had to be sent. The financial crimes were enough to ensure she'd never practice law again. Tommy Brennan quietly transferred to a school in another district, his reputation in Millbrook permanently tarnished by association with the scandal. Sarah Mitchell got the promotion to senior partner that Linda had been hoping for. She sent me a thank you card, which I threw away without reading. And me? I went back to fixing cars and rebuilding engines, but with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. I'd taken apart the machinery of Linda's deception piece by piece, examined every component, and put it back together in a way that finally made sense. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Linda moved to Boston, where she got a job as a paralegal, the only legal work she'd ever be allowed to do again. She sent me a letter once asking for forgiveness, but I never replied. Some engines can't be rebuilt. Sometimes you just have to scrap them and start over. I was finally ready to start over.